Hi everybody, I'm Joey. Well, today we'll be making this four-poster bed, so stick around and see how I did it. Okay, like most jobs, I started out with a big pile of rough sawn walnut. And a lot of this wood was kind of oddly sawn. It was going from like 25 to 35 mil thickness, so I had to spend quite a bit of time getting it all to uniform thickness. I needed most of the length of these boards, but I was able to still kind of cut the worst ends off them, and so I went through the whole stack just checking over each board. So as usual, straighten out one edge and then get onto the bench saw, rip everything down to my rough width. It's about 78 mil or something like that. But I was keeping all the boards in order because I wanted to wrap the timber as best I can around the posts. Then I could set the saw over to 45 degrees and rip one edge of all of the pieces, leaving a little flat spot, and that gives me a good reference point for later on. Anyway, then I swapped the fence over to the other side of the blade, kind of jerry-rigged up the featherboard, and was able to run the other side without the sharp point of the 45 being stuck under my fence, which it would have been if it was on the other side of the saw blade. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Then I could make a couple of experiments with the domino just to see how this thing might go together. So quickly realized, which I kind of thought, that you can't use a domino on every side with such a small box. But it worked really well just using dominoes on 3 of the corners and having the last corner with no dominoes, but with clamping it came together really well. Now I had kind of figured that my saw blade cut wasn't really going to be nice enough. It almost was, but I thought no, I won't risk it, so I used this large 45 degree router bit and just took probably half a mil off each of the boards and really made a nice clean cut. That really helped having that little flat spot on the edge of the boards. Anyway, then I made the story rod up to mark out for my dominoes and ended up just using the second widest slot for all of the dominoes. That way made lining everything up way easier, and I didn't even need to glue the dominoes in. They're really just there for alignment. So off camera I made this, glued up this piece of plywood and to go down the middle of the post, and a little bit of thicknessing and made it fit just right, and then I could get straight into the first glue up, and I wasn't really sure how this was going to go, but went fairly smoothly. I got much better at it as I went along. I think this is the first one. But yeah, with those dominoes, it just made it so easy to glue, to clamp up afterwards after I assembled it. So really well worth the time. Given how many posts I had to do, I ended up buying a box full of new clamps just so I could have, I think I ended up being able to glue up 2 at a time, and I could get, maybe if I was lucky, I could get 3 done in a day, 3 sets. So I've just got some regular, it's called contract filler. It's just a regular kind of nail hole head filler, gap filler for painted surfaces. Just going to add some black oxide to blacken it up. The reason I'm using this and not like a 2-pot kind of builder's bog type thing, so I want the open working time. This stuff is going to stay workable for an hour, whereas a 2-pot filler is only going to give me about 5 minutes, and it's going to take a lot longer than that to do what I want. So probably about maybe a third of all the pieces I ran through the router ended up getting some small chips, which is a bit of a bugger, but that's what it is. Otherwise, most of the joints are really good. But what I'm going to do is run this black bog. I'm going to fill any little chips and bits and pieces that I can see, and then I'm probably going to end up running this bog like down most of the corners. And that's really just going to save the process later, so that means I can get this black bog all over the timber at this stage, and then I'll put it all through the sander, and then I can touch up any pieces, any little gaps or anything that are left from there. But it's much easier to do it at this stage, and I don't have to worry about staining the walnut or anything. It's all going to get sanded off. So I need to make some pretty big slots in the ends of pretty much all of these posts for the joinery. So I made this really simple jig up, and I'm just using a downcut bit, and I'm making the slot a little bit loose, slightly loose on an 18mm piece of birch ply. That way I'm giving plenty of room for the epoxy to get in there and form a good bond. So these blocks of ply are being glued into the posts, so both the top and bottom of the posts will have these, I guess, kind of epoxied in tenons, I suppose they would be. So I had to take my jig apart and thickness the base plate down, because I needed just a couple of extra mil of depth from my router bit. It wasn't quite long enough, so did that, put it back together, and then seeing as the last fit for the tenon was a bit loose, I'm just adding a strip of tape just until I get a really nice push tight fit for the plywood. Added some temporary blocks in those grooves just in case the timber decided to close up. I'm pretty sure it didn't though. Anyway, then I could spend a day, most of the day, sanding all of these posts. So this piece of pine is the base plinth, and I just have to cut a notch out around where the screw holes are going to go, and then I can attach this onto the bottom 4 posts of the bed. The show side of that plinth then gets a matte black paint finish. So then we could start actually trying to assemble this thing, which was fairly straightforward. It's just a matter of holding everything square and getting a screw in. Now I'm just using regular kind of 8 gauge screws for this because I hadn't ordered the fast cap large head screws yet. And you can probably see that I'm using the wrong piece here. That is actually meant to go at the top, not at the bottom, that post, and obviously it doesn't have a little plinth base on it, but we carried on unaware right right to this point. We still didn't work out why it wasn't going together properly, and we have completely the wrong piece there. After working that out, we got back to where we were and continued with just squaring things up and putting screws in. Then I could add the small center beam that'll take the bed slats. That's just screwed in with a couple of brackets. So I always mark and number the slats. That way I don't have to take a spacer with me, and I can just line up the numbers with the marks and the screw holes match again. Next it was time to get onto the headboard, and it's really just a very basic torsion box. So I've just got a sheet of 9mm birch ply, and I'm just using some 18mm scrap ply as the ribs for the torsion box. Then I could add what is essentially like a large tongue that the headboard can slide down over and then be fixed into place from behind. You might recognize this veneer. It's the same as I used on my last project, and the rounded bar unit thing. So I had bought an extra sheet at the same time, and just going to use contact adhesive to glue this sheet on. I saw this trick, I think, by Guy Dunlap. He used the extension lead as the spacer for the contact adhesive, and it worked really well. Usually I just use sticks, but much more convenient to have the long kind of rope. And yeah, so this veneer went on real easy with a couple of guys helping out. And I could veneer the top edge of the headboard. The headboard is meant to slide down over this tongue, but unfortunately there is a large tenon sticking out of the post. So I had to make an alteration to the back bottom corner of the headboard, which was pretty easy fix. And then it could just slide into place. And I could put the top post back into place. I think Danish oil and walnut go together really well, and the finish you can achieve, it's so smooth, so silky smooth with Danish oil and sanding up to say 800 grit between coats. It's just awesome. Then we took the whole thing back apart and started to wrap it up, and the back of the headboard got its final couple of coats of paint, and it was ready to get in the van and head off to the client. Smart team, but lots of lines here, so try to find this one. I think to great match.